Hi, folks, and welcome to the Salty Seaman. Another Tales from the Fleet. We have left boot camp behind, and now we are on our way to A School, which is naval talk for your training school for whatever your job's going to be. As I last left off, I was leaving Atlanta, where I'd snuck a free day in, and now I was flying from Atlanta to Meridian, Mississippi, on a tiny puddle jumper in the middle of the night. I grab my bags and I get in a cab and take a $20 cab ride to base. I think I talked. The cab driver was ex-Navy. He was telling me a little bit about stuff, but regardless, I ended up checking in at like 11:53. Even sneaking that extra day, I was really pushing it according to my orders, and was a little scared, like if they were going to question me on the whole taking a day. But no, the CDO is just this cool dude, and it's first time kind of really being interacting with. Of course, I'd seen other non-RDCs around, but this is like a guy in charge, and no, he's not barking and yelling. He's just asking me where I'm from and, how was boot camp and, telling some one of the watches to go grab me some linens, and then they stuck me in a room. And, went to sleep, woke up the next day for NDOC. And they just basically tell you, how the base works and, how the phases work, which at the time there were two. You want to know what a phase is? I think they're on three. I think most places are on three now, but it might depend on where you're at. But basically, you're considered to be still in a training pipeline from boot camp, and your first training school isn't considered the fleet. You're still in the training pipeline, so they want to ease you into it. So phase one is usually pretty restrictive. I think ours back in the day was a little more lax because we actually got to leave base on phase one, and basically our rules were if you went out in town, you had to be in uniform. Remember, this is 1995. And during the week, you had to be back by 10 o'clock in your room for basically lights out. And when you hit phase two, after 2 or maybe it was 3 weeks, you get allowed to wear civilian clothes. You can stay out till midnight on weekdays, and then you had the weekends to yourself, essentially, weekends and holidays. And there was two sides at the time of the barracks, phase one and phase two side. I was put on phase one, of course. You have three bunkmates in your tack, as they called it, and you share a bathroom, a shower, and all that good stuff. And then there's four different tacks that make up a mod, and that's all four rooms, just like I described, plus a common area in between and one exit. You get on phase one side. There's no TV, so it's just tables and chairs. Phase two side, they have a TV. All the rooms have a mini fridge in it, and it's considered great. Like we're not. I think in phase one we were allowed to keep like anything in there. If you shared a room with a phase one and phase two, or you kind of like there was some weird rule about it because sometimes one side would be overcrowded. But regardless, I mean, it was still freedom to have something. I woke up the next day. After I did the NDOC, I think we pissed. Again, I think it was the first one since boot camp, and we actually met the commanding officer. Now she was interesting. I think she was a commander, and yeah, she had like 5 ribbons on her rack and no warfare pin. I didn't think much of it at the time. I had a fleeter later kind of point out to me, like she had the national defense, a NAM, a COM. I think she must have had an overseas because she had to have done some kind of tour overseas. But yeah, this is mid '90s. There weren't a lot of women on ships. I think she was a supply officer of some sort. Maybe did like, uh, you know, controlling buildings and faculties, that kind of thing. That's how she ended up CO of an A school. But yeah, she had no fleet experience, and you just looking at her chest, you could tell she was. She kind of reminded of that great old aunt that's kind of passive aggressive, guilty. Like she seems sweet and nice on the top, but worked for her a while, and it's just felt like she was. You just felt like an old lady that just like was our kid these days and their stupid things. So luckily, I didn't have to deal with her long. After we left that, we went to our first work detail. That's what you're on some kind of work detail until your class starts. And mine wouldn't start. It was the middle of November, and mine wouldn't start till after the New Year's. So first group I was on was a MM1 in charge. I don't think he'd seen a lot of shore duty in his days, but boy, he seemed to really enjoy it. I think he was an old country boy. And in fact, our first assignment was they were redoing the barn where they kept a bunch of horses for I don't know what reasons. Meridian is an air base slash training school, and I don't know where horses come in there. But anyway, we were cleaning the barn, and of course we realized another Fleety made us feel cool because he was just like, yeah. Another part of phase one is you can't smoke, and he's like, yeah, and I know you guys aren't supposed to be able to smoke, but if you want one, let me know. I'll give you a smoke and on your break. And that's what we did. And I worked for that guy for 2 weeks. Well, I worked for him like the whole time, but first 2 weeks we were cleaning out said barn, and it was just three of us. And I guess we weren't complete fuck ups and people slacking off trying to get out of work, which they dealt with a lot. So we got it done with our help. They got it done ahead of time, and he was very happy with us. And he was just like, "Hey, I'm putting you guys in. I'm gonna give you guys a letter of appreciation," which on the awards rack of the Navy, pretty low on the list. But it's the first thing we ever got. And it was just at first class showing us straight out of boot camp guys some respect for working hard. So I was very appreciative of it. And if I could, I think I have a copy somewhere. If I could find it, I'd give the guy's name because it's M1 something starts with a B. But that was just a work day. That's kind of where we learned the difference between boot camp and at least not being in the fleet, at least being somewhere besides boot camp. We got off at the end of the day. I think you checked in with somebody, and then you were free until whenever you had to be back in your room. So you could go out in town, you could walk around base and go to the little base convenience store, or sit in your room and play music, or read, or sleep. I know I took at least a couple of naps those first couple of days. Started to get to know my roommates. And I said another black guy named Green, my fourth here in like a 2 month period. No, real cool guy. Like I was glad to have him for one of my roommates for the first couple of months. We just got along. He's a good guy. We're both big music people. A little different sides of the aisle. He's more of a hip hop guy. Of course, I'm a rock guy. But we traded a lot of stuff that we ended up just appreciating. I think he really liked Rancid. And there was I remember like some Motorhead I was playing. He was just really digging the rhythm and like pointing out like how this was a great sound. And of course he turned me on to the Wu-Tang Clan, Tupac, and especially still one of my favorite albums of the day, Notorious B.I.G.'s "Ready to Die." Like we played like that in the room forever. Other people, there was another black guy whose name I don't forget, who was our other roommate. He was sweet, nice dude. That's what I remember of him. Next door, it's a skinny little white cowboy. The next room over, that's one of the ones I remember out of him. He was kind of obnoxious. And the next room over, one of the ones I mainly remember was the black guy who he sounded like he had marbles in his mouth. And so, like the other brothers used to just crack on him. I remember he came over and asked for the Raekwon CD from my roommate Green, and the way he said it, just I don't know. You could barely hear him. He was kind of mumbling, and everyone just cracked up. And that kind of became our joke for a long time, just imitating him asking for Raekwon. And yeah, the other problem is like he had some socks that I don't think he ever washed since the beginning of boot camp. These black socks that like kept the shape of his foot. And when he wasn't around, he left them strewn around his tack. We'd go in there and fuck with them and, try not to touch them, of course. But, I mean, this is like this cast imprint of his foot. And we'd see if we could hang them up for, like, stockings for Christmas or, all sorts of weird stuff. Like, I don't think that guy ever knew. He was just a dirty dude who couldn't talk well. And one of the other tacks we had, I think the last one, is where I met Humphrey. He came in a little bit after me. I knew Hump throughout A school, and then a good year into the Navy, he came on my ship. One of the very few that did. The only one I definitely knew like real well for boot camp or A school. So he was a cool dude. God, I don't remember where he's from. He had an accent of some sort. I talked to him not too long ago, not on Facebook, but another military site. But it's been a while. I think he's a firefighter now. Anyway, and another guy that came in a couple days after me was a fleet returnee. I think airman, Airedale type. He was, coming from the Independence. This is in Cusco where I was hoping to go, and I ended up going. He's a guy who gave me a lot of good advice. about the fleet. Told me a lot of real, the guys. I hung around him a lot. His first name was Mike. I don't remember his rate or his last name, but I remember his name was Mike. He had a big old mustache. He was white dude, black hair. And he just told me a lot about Japan because that's where I was hoping to go, and told me a lot about how the real fleet works, and don't worry about this shit and that shit. As a fleet attorney, he only had to do phase one for 3 days. I think they changed that. They made them do the whole phase, and they changed it back. Fleet attorneys don't get affected by that whatsoever, which is the way it should be. We're not in a training pipeline. But yeah, so he was there 3 days, having no uniform, and all of a sudden he was, in civvies, and he got me smokes and stuff. Cause we were sneaking smokes around like the bathroom, and if we were out in town or whatnot. And he, that was the other, just couldn't smoke in phase one, which I don't think they do anymore for any phases that I've seen. But yeah, it's one of those things. Just you don't quite get why. I get some other stuff, but that one I never quite got. As I said, I was in holding company pretty much up to Christmas. I moved around to a couple different jobs. I was getting to know people. I got into phase two, and I went out and bought like a couple of god awful pieces of civilian clothes, like two pairs of cheap jeans and a shirt and this ugly gray, or not gray, yeah, kind of a gray brown flannel shirt. It was the '90s. It was grunge. My parents sent me like a bunch of CDs and my Discman that I'd bought, and a couple of my T-shirts. So I had a little bit of variety. I was still wearing my Navy sneakers, my athletic shoes, the New Balance. And that's just kind of when I went on. You put accoutrements on, like you'd have your web belt on, or you'd wear your raincoat over it if it was cold. You just wear you wore what you had, and the stuff that you could wear of your uniform components. You didn't realize it really makes you a fucking booter. I got broke of that habit and I did that a lot in school, but got broke of the habit really quick in the fleet. But right before we left for Christmas break, I finally got moved over to the phase two side where they had the TV, and you're next to the smoke deck, which is important to me. And both my roommates were already on leave, so I didn't meet them initially. But then I went home, took a Greyhound up to Arkansas in my dress blues because I was a booter, and like that just seemed like a cool thing to do. And then I had 10 days with my parents, back in my house, in my old room, and it almost felt surreal. My dogs barked at me when I first got there. So it was like I'd only been gone 4 months, and it felt like years in a weird way. It was so surreal, and then it still felt very familiar at the same time. It's the last time that would happen coming back home on leave. But I saw some friends of mine. My friend Sherry came up, was home visiting her mom from college down in Southern Miss. My friend from the Air Force, I talked about, Bill. He was home on leave. It's one of our first stops, actually, seeing him and his mom. And Sherry actually showed up. A friend of mine named Joe, who's now, professional in his career field, good guy. At the time, he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. He hadn't done shit since high school. And the guy that joined the Marines, Eric, I talked to him on the phone only. He had some kind of issues in boot camp. I don't really know what. I don't know if he ever even finished out his term. But it's very vague. I mean, if I have him on Facebook. If I ever sit down and talk to him again, I'll ask him about that because I don't really know. But yeah, it was just 10 days of that. It was cool, but at the same time, it was kind of like kind of spinning your wheels. Other than enjoying the time off, is like you didn't. For me, it just didn't feel like there was just a whole lot there. Other than I didn't have to be in the Navy and doing the Navy's work. But but it was great overall, and yeah, finally got back on the bus, went home, and then I went through Yeoman A school properly. There wasn't a lot to it. It was it's learning how to do paperwork, and the funny thing is like they have a thing called typing out. Like you have to be able to type 25 words a minute for the job, and they don't pre-test you. So I took typing in high school. I finished the first day while I was still on holding company. But a handful of guys in class who couldn't, who were still looking at not graduating because they couldn't finish, they couldn't get the type out class done. So that became comical. And if you wanted like top grad and get the promotion, I think you had to type 35. It bumped up there, and I typed 75 and still do to this day. So I passed that test. Not that I got it, but yeah, that was class. We were the first classes, one of the first classes to go to fully computer. They didn't teach us on typewriters. And the beginning of class was how to work a computer. It was like a first couple of days, something they don't have to teach kids anymore this day. They just tell you turn on a computer and log on to this, and everyone going through is going to know it. So, but back here in 96, this is I had taken computer classes in high school. I was fine, but there was a lot of people who weren't. And I get through the class. It was a joke. On the other side of the house, you have you did PT a couple times a week. It was usually after school. You did formation stuff. You had watches. You had the occasional guys who were really trying to be dicks. We had this senior chief who would call surprise inspections, looking at fingernails and shit. I don't know, but I mean, overall, like didn't care. It was so laid back. But a few other things of note is that this is the guy I mostly hung around during this time, a guy named Victor. He was, we didn't hear just a couple of heavy metal punk rock dudes, and we started, you know, hanging out less with the people on bass and started hanging out with, like the punk rock kids out in town in Meridian. And it's through them, I saw like local punk show. We hung out at their houses a bunch of times, the tattoo shop where they all hung out is where I got my first tattoo. Being in the punk rock mindset, I got the Misfits skull on my right shoulder. Now this was done in red because I didn't want it in black and be kind of a cliche, so I wanted a different color. And the guy told me, is like, well, you probably have to come in like in a year or so and get a second coat because that's gonna fade. And I never did. And to this, sure enough, like I've never done anything to it. One of these days I'm gonna fix it. But yeah, you can kind of look at it and you may see some kind of weird red blob somewhere on there, and maybe you possibly think it's a birthmark. It faded pretty damn bad. And yeah, that was kind of the height of the excitement for me, during my off times in Meridian. No great stories. Partied a couple times, like had some beers or whatnot, but nothing spectacular. One thing I do remember was my first open mast, if you know what that means. A non-judicial punishment, but the captain decides to do it in front of everybody. And the case was, apparently there was two guys who knew each other from high school. One was a Marine, because the Marine supply and admin school was there like ours. And one sailor, and it was a sailor's birthday. He turned 20, and his buddy, the Marine, was already 21, and he was buying him drinks, and he got him completely fucking wasted. And he basically carried him back to his barracks. His roommates all, grabbed him, threw him let him puke in the tub, and kind of put him in the tub, and he was turning colors apparently. And his roommate wanted to go get the OD and get the guy an ambulance, and his Marine buddy was, not wanting to get his friend in trouble, and also probably not get himself in trouble, was blocking them, and they got in a scuffle. And nothing really big happened, but he did get physical with the Marine, trying to get out of the room to go find the OD because he was physically blocking the door. So they told everyone about everyone was at the mast, and the Marine was there. He got punished on his side, but the CO, she came down like harder on the guy that was trying to help the drunk guy. Like the guy who was drinking underage didn't get as much of a punishment as the other guy. She said, like, this isn't the way, there had to be another way, you chose violence, blah. I mean, it was fucking surreal. I mean, whatever point she was trying to prove just like pissed everyone else off. We just saw that and we're like, are you fucking kidding me? Oh my God, fuck that. There was also, it was called the discharge dock there. This is like I said, 95, 96. I don't know, maybe there's a drawdown thing, but basically he was just, you go see the base shrink, and if you said you weren't happy with the Navy, he'd get you out on a failure to adapt discharge. And we had a whole division of them. Guys whose life was so tough, like they'd be people who were just homesick basically at this point. And then I think this is like, like, oh my God, I can't handle the Navy. And like, they haven't even really been in the Navy yet. But my friend I was telling you about, Vic, he ended up on that thing. He had a wife and brand new baby back home, and He just got homesick. I found out years later he didn't go through with it. Someone talked him out of it, and he actually finished his 4. So good for Vic, who's now a nurse. But yeah, it was kind of like weird looking at that, and we're going through the classes, and they're offering advancement to E4 for the top class people, and but you have to sign up for an extra year. And I didn't quite make it anyway, but I wasn't at the time not thinking I wouldn't have even tried for it. I didn't want to do an extra year, but I was definitely planning on finishing my time out. One of the other things that they give you that's called the wish list, the dream sheet, whatever you call it, at the end of school. You kind of look at it and you list the places you want to go and your preferences. And most people are putting usually close to their own home, of course. And the urban legend always is if you pick one coast, they'll put you on the opposite. And if you ask for overseas, they'll usually give it to you. And that's what happened to me. I asked for Japan and I asked for overseas, and basically said, what's the furthest point from Arkansas? And that's what they gave me. So I looked out like most people didn't. A few got something they liked, but most didn't. The class leader was a fleet returnee. Another guy had trouble typing out. He struck from deck seaman. Had been working as a yeoman forever. Regardless, yeah, he got the other. He had also just came stationed in Japan, and he got the other set of orders to Japan. As class leader, he got to choose of the list. But that was kind of it. Like I made friends, and it was an okay time, and it was very much Navy light. There was no big deal about it. I took leave back to Georgia for the most part, staying with my aunt. I fucked up my time, like my timing, and like realized I was gonna go home and spend at least 4 days with my parents, and I was too late. And my mom actually came and spent the last weekend with me, drove down to Georgia. And then after that, I hopped on a plane to Yokosuka, Japan, and that's where we'll pick up next time. Hope you freaks enjoy this. Have a lot of fun coming down memory lane on this, so I hope you guys are enjoying it too. And next time we'll get to the Fleet, Yokosuka, Japan, TPU. Catch you later, freaks. Peace.